great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And we're going to wait a few more minutes until everyone else trips into the room. I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Joy Chip Reading Project and our book discussion. I'm your host, James Edward Mills, and I am pleased to introduce to you my friend, Myrna Valerio, author of the remarkable memoir, A Beautiful Work in Progress. This personal story shares with us the importance of defining not only one's role for self and personal identity, but also the role that physical activity can have in creating a fabulous life worth living. In her own life as an ultramarathon runner, a mom, and as an educator, Myrna helps us to understand how we can live our best lives simply by being exactly who we are. Now, before we get started and dive into tonight's conversation, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm screening into you from Madison, Wisconsin, the ancestral homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place known for time immemorial as Date Job. So please, wherever you are in North America, please take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the Native people who once called where you live now home. I'd also like to thank the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for their support in this and other online discussions hosted by the Joy Chip Project, as well as the financial contributions of Ceres Innovations and Outdoor Research, who provide us with the funds each month to pay our speakers a modest honorarium. So thank you. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the Joy Chip Project, I'm a freelance journalist and an independent media producer. And I have a specialty in outdoor recreation and environmental conservation, and a further specialty in issues of racial diversity, equity, and inclusion in the access to our natural resources and our public land. And I teach an undergraduate course here at the Nelson Institute called Outdoors for All. And many of the titles that we're discussing in this book group are part of our reading list. Now, the discussions in this reading group is an opportunity for non-students and the general public to learn a little bit about the experiences that people of color and our relationship with the natural world is shared through memoir and academic research. Now, as I mentioned, our guest tonight is Mirna Valerio, and she is no stranger to the importance of education in personal growth and development. She's a native of Brooklyn, New York, where she has been a teacher, a choral director, and also a cross-country coach. Now, among her personal achievements, she claims as well the roles of ultra-distance runner, a relatively new cyclist and skier, and author. Myrna's athletic stories have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Runner's World, NBC Nightly News, CNN, and the viral video produced by REI called The Myrnavator. Now, I personally had the pleasure of profiling Myrna in an article that I wrote for Outside Magazine called The New Face of Adventure. And in her own writing, she's been featured in Women's Running Magazine, Self Magazine, Outside Online, and Runner's World. Now, in 2018, she was named by National Geographic as an Adventurer of the Year. And in 2020, she appeared on the Kelly Clarkson Show in Access Daily, and most recently was featured on the Today Show. Now, when she's not playing outdoors, she is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant who focuses on bringing reluctant communities to the work of social justice. She currently lives, works, and trains in Vermont. I'm going to see if I can get her to, oh, wow, I realized I wasn't recording. So I'm going to go ahead and click record, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Myrna, thank you so much for being here. And I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with you tonight. And I'm also really interested in learning a few of the things I don't know about you. You and I have actually been friends for many years now. And I've really enjoyed your book for a variety of different reasons. And I want to start off with a couple of basic questions for you. Again, as I mentioned, please, everyone in the audience, if you'll take the time to ask your questions in advance in the chat, we can hopefully incorporate as many of your questions as we possibly can in the course of our conversation tonight. Now, I think it's safe to say that your entire narrative spans many decades as a mother, as an athlete, and as an educator. And in the opening pages of your book, you start off, as we best know you, as an ultra marathon runner. Now, I'm curious if you can take us back to the beginning. Where did your interest in the outdoors and physical activity begin, and how did you begin this beautiful work in progress?
Sure. Thank you. Again, I'm like so excited to be here and to see all your faces. So thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. So there are two stories. There's my sort of outdoor story, and then there's my running story. My outdoor story starts when I was 8, and I had an opportunity to go to sleepaway camp through a public-private partnership. And I went to sleepaway camp in the Catskills in upstate New York. And there was all these city kids from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Staten Island, Queens, and Manhattan, who were sent up to this camp in the middle of the Catskills, in the middle of the woods. And that was my first time, my first experience being out in that kind of nature, right? For an extended period of time. And I had a blast. I loved every single minute of it. And it was so awesome that at the end of it, I would not get off the bus. And I wouldn't get off the bus, and my parents had to come like drag me off the bus because I didn't want to go back home to Brooklyn. And and so that was like the beginning of my love for being out in nature in that kind of way. And then, and I also just grew up roaming the streets of Brooklyn with my family. That it was a time when, we didn't have video games except for like Atari 2600. Anybody remember that? Like that was like, that's way back. That's a throwback. And we just spent most of our time outside. In the summertime, our parents would kick us out onto the street and be like, see you later. Don't come back until the street lamps are on. And if you have to pee, find somewhere to pee outside. And and that's what we did. We roamed from park to park to park to park, free lunch to free lunch because we were all poor. And so we had free lunch at the public schools. And that was our existence. I mean, we would stay in the park and dig up worms and be leaders amongst ourselves and have a good time. And so that's actually why I'm such an outdoor person today, is because I grew up outside. Even though I grew up in an urban area, that was what we did. That was our MO. And then I had a chance to go to a boarding school, a very posh, fancy boarding school outside New York City, and where the very first day, if you read the book, the story, I tried out for the field hockey team, and it was really tough. I mean, I wanted to play a sport. I really, really, really wanted to be part of any kind of team because I had never had that experience before. And so I'd seen people playing field hockey when I had visited other boarding schools in New England, and it seemed very interesting to me. So I decided to stop by the field hockey field and see what they were up to. I joined them in their tryouts because, they looked like they were just having a good time. Turns out the practice hadn't started yet. And, and so, that's when I was introduced to, having to run my first mile ever on the field with grass. And I was wearing Keds with no treads and no sports bra to speak of or anything. I was just like completely unprepared, but we had to run a mile to warm up, and then we did a timed mile, and then we did 2.5 hours of practice after that. And it was so tough. It was the hardest thing that I had ever had to do physically up until that point. But the coach comes up to me and says, hey, this is hard, right? And yeah. And I can't speak. I'm just like going like that because I can't breathe. And she's like, but you're out here, you're doing it. Good job. And she didn't yell at me. She didn't say, you're too slow, you don't know what you're doing, go do community service or go play volleyball or something, and she allowed me to stay on the team. And that first day was so cathartic for me because I was like, wow, like she didn't make fun of me. She didn't denigrate me. She didn't yell at me. She's like, hey, you're here. You obviously you want to be here. Okay. And so that day I decided, okay, well, I'm going to have to get better at running because I don't know, I really don't know what I'm doing. And if that's what's going to help me to be able to play this game. And so I started running the next day. I'd seen people in New York and stuff bobbing around, mostly white people. And I was like, maybe, well, I guess that's what I have to do. So I got up the next day at boarding school. I'm in my dorm. I rolled down the hill. The field was down the hill. And I ran those same 5 laps. I didn't really run because it was still really hard for me. It was like, I would run the shorts and walk the longs, and then I would run the longs and walk the shorts. And I did that a couple of days a week until I got better at sports. I got better at field hockey. I was able to, do the warm up without stopping. I was able to run up and down the field for 2 hours during a game. And, in that process, I really began to like running. I like the solo time it gave me because I've always been an introvert, even though like on stage and stuff, I don't seem like an introvert. I'm an introvert. And it got me out of my shyness though, which is not the same as being introverted. And my body just felt good. Not always in the moment. But like afterwards, I'd feel so good and so ready for school because I was always a morning runner. Not nowadays though. And and it just made this profound change in my life. I didn't know at that point that that's what it was doing, but that's what it did. And then I ended up playing lacrosse, and I played lacrosse for 4 years as well. And I love that game, and I wish I could play it now. And but yeah, so that's my running story. I didn't start running to lose weight or to anything else, but to get better at field hockey and lacrosse. That's what I wanted to do, and then it ended up being just an incredible sport on its own for me.
So physical activity was definitely a part of your growing up. It was part of your identity as a young adult. But there's an incident that you describe in your book that I felt was really compelling to me, because I've actually, having been in specialty retail myself for many years, I know that these kinds of things happen. But you were buying a pair of shoes in a running store, and in fact, I think it was one of your very first pairs of shoes that you wanted to buy for yourself with your own money in order to get fit. But you had a pretty negative experience with the salesperson there. Can you tell us that story and how it impacted your perception of how other people perceive you?
Yeah. And I remember exactly what those shoes were. They were a forest green pair of Adidas. And this store is on 3rd Avenue in New York City, between 86 and 87. It's not there anymore. But I was actually working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art as an intern. And I again had seen all these people running and stuff, and I wanted to run in the park like everybody else. And so I needed a new pair of shoes. And this pair of shoes would be the first new pair of running shoes that I had bought for myself. And so I go to the store, sit down, and said, hey, I'm looking for a pair of running shoes. And I said, and he said, well, how many miles are you running? I'm like, I don't know, 1, 2. And he goes, I'm like, can I just have the shoes, please? And yeah, I mean, and it was really upsetting. I mean, I was going to buy the shoes anyway, because I needed to run. But it was very telling about, what people thought running was. Running, you're supposed to run long. You're supposed to run a lot of miles. You're supposed to not look like me. But that is kind of, till this day, been people's response, and they might not even say anything, but their body language says everything. Like, you're a runner, that kind of thing. I will say that it's happening less and less. But back then, I mean, it was just unheard of for somebody that looks like me to just, I just want to run. I want to run 1 to 2 miles. What's wrong with that? So yeah, so there was this perception that, you know, you had to run a certain number of miles, look a certain way, you know, run a certain speed. And I didn't fit into any of those stereotypes.
You know, and again, I think it's interesting that you had these two diametrically opposed experiences, starting off with a very supportive field hockey coach who didn't disparage you because of your physical ability or your appearance, but you have a retail sales clerk that is basically giving you the negative side eye, suggesting that this isn't something that you should do. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, how do you reconcile those two reactions to two different people? And those are very common experiences. And how do we overcome those? What is it about our ability to take the positive and run with it literally, and take the negative and turn it into something that will not allow us to denigrate ourselves for our apparent lack of ability or our appearance when it comes to being able to spend time in the outdoors or to engage in physical activity?
Well, you know, I was very lucky. I was very lucky to have had the extraordinarily positive experience with running, even though it was really hard and my body was hurting and I couldn't breathe, you know. But, you know, having that person say, hey, you're doing a good job, you know, keep it up. And then also having the experience of, you know, my sports experience being, you know, like no one cares that you're fat, you know, it's all about athletics. It's all about being a stronger runner, being a faster runner on the field, being able to, you know, pivot back and forth, you know, without injuring yourself. That's what that experience was. And so running was my reference point for running. And so when this guy, and he had to be like 18 or something, you know, sort of disparages me like that, even though it hurt in a moment, and I was really annoyed and really frustrated, I knew better. You know, I was already a runner, so he wasn't going to deter me with his nasty attitude. And that's just my attitude. That's how I handle things personally. When you know, people say, you know, can you even run 5K? I'm like, whatever, goodbye. You know, I can run 100K, so shetty yeti. But I think it's really important to know that people are always going to have something to say. They're always going to have looks. They're always going to have opinions about who you are and, you know, what they think you can do or can't do. Just know that, and like, I just live with that. I know people are, you know, going to look at me and like today at the ski resort. Oh, are you with a club? You know, making some assumptions about, you know, why I'm there. And so, and I'm like, okay, well, no, I'm not actually. And I just went about my way. And so it takes a lot of practice to have courage to just be like, well, you know, despite whatever you think about me, despite what you think about my running, or the fact that, or despite the fact that you think that I am going to ruin my knees running, or I'm going to ruin my back, or I should just go to the gym, or I should just go swimming or go on a diet, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do, because I'm not doing this for anybody else. I'm doing this for me. And then go find somebody that is going to give you a positive experience in running. You know, if a lot of us have had very negative experiences with, you know, PE class in school, or like maybe work with a personal trainer, and the first thing that they make you do is to step on a scale and then start talking about, well, we just need to lose weight. I just want to learn how to run. But we've got to have courage to say, look, I want to learn how to run. Can you do that? And if you can't, then I need somebody else. You know, or if you join a running club or something, if they're not serving you, then don't stay there. Learn how to do it on your own. Get on a treadmill, go to the gym, and just do your own thing. We really have to create a positive experience, a positive relationship with running or any other sport that you want to do, before we start to like get head on into it and like have all these goals and stuff, develop a positive relationship with it first, right? There are lots of awesome training programs online. There are lots of people that will help you. There are coaches that are amazing whose goal is it to get you to like running. And they're not going to do it in a way that makes you hate it, you know, or that makes you hate the process or yourself. I think that's the most important thing.
And frankly, that's the thing that I think drives a lot of people out of physical activity and, you know, frankly, into a lot of negative health outcomes. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where, you know, we have a tremendous disservice that we do to ourselves by talking ourselves mm-hmm. out of being physically active. Now, one of the things that I absolutely loved in the book was chapter 9, and it was called The Gift of My Mother's Legs. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, and for the sake of this next part of the conversation, I'd love it, Myrna, if you could actually read that middle section that we spoke about a minute ago, hopefully to give everybody on the call an understanding of exactly why this particular chapter, in my opinion, is so important. I'll let you go ahead and take it away. And in the meantime, if you all have questions or if there's anything that you'd like to share in the chat, please don't hesitate to do so.
Excuse me. Oh gosh, these are, hold on one sec. These are so dirty.
I'm guessing they're a lot like mine. Because I'm guessing you're probably like me, you don't use glasses all the time.
No.
Just for reading.
Okay. Every neighborhood has to have an anchor, a place where people can find community, gossip about the latest events, who had a heart attack, who died, who bought a car, who's in jail, and shop daily for family provisions. Scatturo's was the place where the store manager, Dennis, would greet people. Need the best fruit? He could hook you up. Need milk that wasn't nearing expiration? He would go to the back and get it for you himself. Everyone shopped at Scatturo's. The produce was plentiful, cheap, and unbruised. They had real food, meats from local New York and New Jersey farms in a deli that topped many of the other delis in the area. Italian women and men worked the deli, made you Italian sandwiches, and understood when you asked for just a quarter pound of ham because that's all your family could afford. My mother and Sherry found a community there, one in which they were loved, respected, and treated like human beings, unlike when they had to visit the public assistance office, for example. They could feed their children wholesome meals every single day of the week, even with public assistance. These women worked hard to make sure their kids, husbands, and boyfriends were all well fed, despite the frequent dire financial circumstances they often faced. They made sure that their families never went without food, even if it meant putting pride aside and accepting USDA canned pork and beans, and whatever other surplus food they could get. When times were good and jobs were plentiful, both women worked late hours, allowing themselves a few luxuries like buying us new shoes and clothes that fit, and maybe something for themselves. Sherry had a massive fatal heart attack in 1993 at the age of 37, providing a shock from which almost no one in the family has recovered. She dealt with high blood pressure and other health issues for a long time and hadn't been feeling well in the months leading up to the event that would leave 5 children parentless. My mother, her best friend, ran upstairs when Sherry's oldest son, Mel, called for help from the top of the hallway stairs. She tried her best to revive Sherry, giving her chest compressions until the ambulance arrived. But Sherry was already dead, November 12th, 1993. Both women worked when they could find work and stayed at home when they couldn't, all the while remaining the primary caregivers in their respective families. They washed clothes, mopped floors, tended to their partners, cared for their aging parents and other infirm relatives, cooked, shopped, showed up to school events, and when they could splurge, took us all to Rockaway Beach or Coney Island. Except for the occasional gifts for themselves, they rarely took a break from a busy life. They took great pains to ensure their family's comfort and success, but this came with a tremendous cost. Sherry died in service to all. She's one of the family members whose name I invoke and whose memory I carry when I run. I run for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I got to tell you that I love this for a variety of different reasons. And I think the biggest part of that is that it's beautifully written because it is a deeply visual interpretation of what is infinitely personal. And I can personally relate to having a hardworking mother, particularly a Black hardworking mother, who basically devoted herself, body, and soul to her family and her community. And I think that that is resonant of a lot of women today. And I think that your story tells us that there's a lot that we can glean from understanding, some of the limitations that we have when it comes to the pressure that we put on ourselves and each other when it comes to, just, living our lives. Can you tell us just a little bit more about your mother, Joanne, and a little bit about the woman that she ultimately inspired you to become as well as a mother?
No one has ever asked me this question, and I really appreciate it because my mom is my hero. She is my absolute hero. And she's, she was born in Queens, grew up in Brooklyn. She is turning 65 next month. And she's kind of shocked about that. She's like, I don't feel like I'm 65 because she's always been very youthful in everything that she does. Her spirit is youthful. She looks young. And that whole saying, black don't crack. Anyway, and she really has been a rock in the family. She's like the family caterer for every event, because she's the best cook in the family. She's the family seamstress. And this woman, she didn't even finish 8th grade. And is one of the most intelligent people I know. We also call her Dr. Joanne because she's also like the family doctor. She's always right. Everything, oh, this is what you have. You probably have adrenal, fatigue. And okay, mom. And then I go to the doctor and that's what it is. And so, yeah, I actually went, she used to volunteer. I was in Head Start as a preschooler. And if you're not familiar with Head Start, it was a federal preschool program that for poor kids. And and the families, mostly the moms, are kind of required to come and help out. But back in the day, I don't know what it's like now. And so my mom couldn't come because I was so distracted by her. They would have to put her in an office somewhere where I couldn't see her, because I was kind of obsessed with my mom, even as a young child. Everything for her, everything is an educational moment, right? Even with her grandchildren, every single thing is about education. And she'll go and bring out a book. She'll talk about the constellation. She'll talk about. She is just, her brain is always working. But she's always done things in service of other people. And finally, it wasn't until 2 years ago that she finally actually started doing stuff for herself. A couple of months ago, she hadn't flown anywhere in 35 years because she had an extreme fear of flying. And she had flown before, when she was younger. And so she wouldn't get on a plane. And so she was also feeling very bad about it because my brother lives in Arizona. And so I was like, you know what, Mom? I was like, this is a year you can get over it. So I bought her a ticket. And we made I put us up at the Four Seasons because I had a work trip anyway. I had to go learn how to mountain bike as part of my job. And so I was like, Mom, you're coming with us. You're coming with me. And she got on the plane. And at that moment, she was like, I can do anything now. She's going to Greece this summer without me, which I don't appreciate. Anyway.
You need to turn it into a work trip.
Well, actually, I'm going to be in Africa.
All right.
On another bike thing.
Yeah.
So she's still the same inspirational, motivational, incredible person. And it's so awesome to see her finally coming into herself and doing the stuff that she wants to do. And, telling people to F off when she needs to, which is not something that she's used to doing.
Well, your mother sounds a lot like my mother. And I think mainly the reason why I asked this question is, because I think that it really frames much of what all of this is about. I mean, being able to give yourself permission to do the things that are best for you. And sadly, a lot of people don't do that because they're too busy taking care of other people. And I'd be curious to know, in terms of what you think is the best way to, reframe your social cultural identity in such a way that sometimes doing the best for others can be doing the best for yourself. Is there a way to do both?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think that again, it's a practice, right? It's a practice of stepping out of that role that society has created specifically for women and people who identify as women. And because and you also have to know that people are going to probably react very violently, not physically necessarily, but because that is not the reality. The reality is that the woman is supposed to do this. She's supposed to take care of the home. Even if she works full time, she's supposed to do this. She's supposed to take on all of the emotional burden of the family, everything. And so once people start to step out of that, it's very jarring to the family. I remember whenever my mother went back to work, it was like, no, we don't want you to go to work. We want you to be home, but it was, it was as much financial as it was like, I need to do something for myself, and it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult when that's been the expectation that everybody places on you in the family. Oh, you're going where? Like, even my stepfather like tries to get her not to go to places, and I take her camping with me all the time when I have races. You're too old to camp. That's what my stepfather says. And she's like, okay, whatever, dude, bye. And so, but it takes those little steps, and she is like just blossoming now. Like, I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Like, I'm working on the sewing that I've wanted to work on for the last couple of years. Okay, great, Mom. Can you make me something?
Wow. So what has your experience taught you about the importance of identity, both socially and culturally, at least, the roles that seem to be pre-described for us? You're a woman, you've got to be a mother, you've got to be a caregiver, you've got to be a provider. You're a man, you must be strong and capable and show no fear. Now, how is it possible to get out of those pre-described roles, and can we perhaps redefine them and maybe create identities of our own?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's absolutely possible to step outside of that. But I think what is required is knowing yourself. You have to know yourself. Who are you? What do you like to do? What do you not want in your life? What is not serving you? What do you want to explore? What are you curious about? You have to start working on answering those questions, and the answers might change, right? And then going after it. You don't have to like go after it really hard, but just like the whole like exploration has been a theme in my life. Exploration and curiosity. I'm curious about that. Oh, I've never seen that. Oh, let me go find more out about it. When I saw rollerbladers in Central Park, through the windows in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I was like, that looks interesting. I want to do that. So I went and my friend bought me a pair of rollerblades, and I went rollerblading. I didn't dig it, but I explored it. I don't know where those rollerblades are. But now my skiing people are like, you need to rollerblade for cross training. I'm like, skiing is my main sport.
Well, that's funny. My wife sold my rollerblades, and I don't miss them. So
it's a different thing. I mean, it was fun, when I wasn't falling. But it really is about, following the lead of your heart, your curiosity, and I hate the word bucket list. I hate that. Just like a list of stuff that you want to do and start checking it off. It doesn't have to be a huge, I want to go island hopping in Greece, mother. It doesn't have to be as huge as that. It could be, I want to try running around the block. And through those activities, you get to know yourself. You get to know where your identity is. Now, if you're thinking about like socio-cultural identity, I think that's an extension of that. Right. You have to, be thinking about, what are the influences what are the things that inform your life right now? Why do you think the way you think? Why do you do this the way you do this? Why do you react to a certain situation the way you do, right? And thinking about what those influences are from your home community, from, the greater society, from the world, and, be thinking about those. Why do I think that even if I made dinner, I got to clean up the kitchen? Why do I think that? Was I raised to believe that? Because I ain't cleaning up shit. Excuse me, sorry.
There's a mother with a son, I get it.
So like being very meta about, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? Why am I doing this? Why am I talking to you all? Why am I drinking tea? Like just be thinking about what you're thinking about or what you're doing, and make a practice of it. Why do I always nag my child in the morning? Because that's what I grew up being the recipient of, nagging. And so I try to change that because I don't like it. It doesn't make me feel good, right? I can nag him later when he gets back to school, and so, which I do. And I ask him a lot of questions, and then he responds with, I wasn't expecting a barrage of questions. But anyway, just being really cognizant and aware of your own behaviors is I think is how we move out of our own, socialized norms, right? If that's what we want to do and if that's what we need to do.
Awesome. So now, a big part of what you're doing now as a consultant is in the realm of what can best be described as social justice and the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in how we manage basically many aspects of our culture, of our society. I think that there's a lot to be said about the notion of self-identity as an expression of human behavior. And especially when we're talking about the outdoors, when we have the very complicated issues of access. Who has access to public land? Who has access to green space? Now, I'm curious if you think if true freedom is even possible if a person isn't encouraged to be themselves.
Ooh, that's a deep question. What is true freedom? I mean, what does that mean? I think it's very in the world that we live in, especially, and I'm speaking personally as someone who is Black, someone who is fat, someone who is a woman or identifies as a woman, is also somebody that is Latinx, right? So, and I always feel free to be myself, and that's me personally, right? Because I've come to a point where I don't really care. IDAF, GAF.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Everyone got that, right? Okay, please continue.
I saw it, but I skipped the letter. And but that's me. Again, when I was at the ski resort, like I'm still a new skier, but I'm like, I'm just going to exert myself, or of who I am. I'm just going to be who I am because it takes so much energy to do anything else and to hide parts of myself. And I know that can be very dangerous for some people, depending on whatever your identities are. But I think that we can approach this idea of freedom the more deeply we know ourselves, the more deeply we know other people and understand their identities and their perspectives, their lived experiences, because that's what it's about. You can see or know someone's identity, but you also have to know what their lived experiences are. You have to understand that they might have different perspectives and lived experiences than you. And each of those things are legitimate and real. Once we know that, once we acknowledge that, and so for a lot of people, it takes work because you know, when you live in whatever kind of bubble you live in, you know, that's your reality. And sometimes people think that's the only reality,
Right.
but it's not, right? And so, you know, in the outdoors, like we have to know that people have different experiences, you know, different experiences, um, different relationships with the outdoors that are all legitimate, right? And we have to acknowledge that in order for us to, you know, approach that idea of full freedom.
Yeah. I mean, you've probably had the experience where people have told you, well, you shouldn't feel like that. You know, when you're uncomfortable being the one Black person at the ski resort. Or
I'm sure he didn't mean it. I'm sure he didn't mean it. I'm sure what they meant was, I'm sure they were just shocked by you. I'm you know,
right.
they just weren't expecting to see you.
See, and those are the kinds of things that I think are really important when it comes to acknowledging the lived experiences of others, because I think that we fail to believe that someone can have a experience contrary to ours because what we experience is all we've ever known. But really, it's not until we know what other people think and feel and look into imagining how things might be different that we can hopefully achieve freedom for other people. We've got 10 minutes left, and I don't want to completely monopolize the conversation. We've had a lot of great questions from the audience. I'm going to put my friend Natasha Buffo on the spot. She has a question. I'm going to go ahead and ask her to unmute. And Natasha, please ask your question, and thank you very much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. And thanks, Myrna, for being here. I was just curious about your writing experience with your book, how the writing, the editing, the publishing process went, and kind of more specifically, the positives and negatives around remaining true to your story and your authentic voice, because I think we can all perceive a very unique personality, and trying to hold on to that and keep that in your book with other influences coming in through the publishing process.
Great question. Thank you. I had a really interesting journey in writing, because a lot of people normally ask me, you know, well, did you self-publish, or did you what did you do? Did you send out queries? I didn't do any of that. The agents approached me. They were like, hey, there were two main agents that approached me. One is a woman called Tanya McKinnon, who runs a beautiful press that is, or not press, an agency rather, that is for Black intellectuals. And did a really boutique but beautiful. I mean, she's supported many awesome Black writers, and so there was her, and there was another agent, Jane Distel, who had a bigger clientele, of which one of them was Obama. So I went with her because Obama, and so, and you know, the idea, hey, you know, we love your blog. We think that any kind of book coming from you would be great. What do you want to write? I was like, I want to write a memoir, because I had actually I'd gone to grad school for 2 semesters, two, for writing and for creative nonfiction. And so I was always going to write a memoir, because I was taking memoir classes. And I did not know the memoir was going to be about running. And so so I signed with this agent, and, you know, they walked me through the proposal process, which I think was harder than writing the manuscript, because I had to gather all my ideas and, you know, and narrative format, structured, I mean, all of this stuff, and which I was not used to doing in such volume. And so, and then I had to write a couple of chapters and submit it. And so I did that, they sold it to Grand Harbor Publishing, which has since then been acquired by Amazon. And then they gave me 4 months to write the book. She thought they were going to give me a year. And I was like, oh, can I okay, no problem. 4 months. And then I got a 2-week extension. And I finished the manuscript the day before I did my, I want to say my 3rd Marine Corps marathon with my cousins and her kids surrounding me. I was like, I have one more sentence to write, and I would like you to stand around me as I write this and then submit it. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And so, and then after that, you know, it took a couple of weeks for the editor, for the developmental editor to get back to me. And I remember opening the document, and it was like so much red, you know, track changes. I hate track changes. Right? And I was like, and then I just closed it. Didn't look at it for another 2 weeks. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. My ego can't, no. And then, you know, as I worked through it and worked with the developmental editor, there were a lot of things that he didn't know that I referenced, he didn't know about. You know, the way people said things, or the fact that that people had, that poor people, not all poor people, but, you know, and have access to free lunch in the public schools during school, and then during the summer. Like, he's like, can you explain this a little bit? I'm like, okay. He's like, oh, I didn't know that, you know? So like, y'all, it matters who's editing your stuff. Because we all have different frames of references and you know, touch points. So I had to explain a lot to both the developmental editor and then the line editor, and then the legal editor as well. Like, you know, because there's a lawyer that reads your stuff, and you know, you know, differing worlds. Now I know the book that I'm working on, another book, that I'm going to request someone who is African American as my developmental editor, and someone, you know, who has an urban background. So, so I don't have to explain to the editor, you know, and so that they can, you know, help me edit in the voice, you know, and I'm very outspoken about what I want and what I need. I'm like, actually, no, I'm not doing that. You know? Actually, this is saying, I don't want these words in here. So like that, because that's not my voice. So that was, it was a really cool process that happened. And then, so the other thing, I know I'm like going on and on, but I think this is really important, you know, when the cover design, this is not my favorite cover design, but it is 100 times better than the original thing. The original cover design, I wish I had it up here, this was red. I was in a sassy pose. It was red, and then this figure was a black cutout, and there was something, and then like I think there were eyes maybe that were white, and so I couldn't I was like, but there's something wrong. There's something really wrong with this, but I don't know what it is. And I showed 2 of my students, and they were like, Miss Valerio, it's blackface. Because none of the graphic artists at the publishing company were Black. They were all white. And didn't realize that this cutout looked like a Belgian figurine, you know, that in blackface. Like, and I was like, oh, it looks like Aunt Jemima. That's what it looks like. And so I wrote this long letter to my agent and to the publishers. I was like, you know, I'm going to put my diversity hat, my diversity, equity, and inclusion hat. This ain't gonna work. Here's why. You have the body in this like sort of sassy, and sassy is not a word that Black people like to use. Mm-hmm. Because it was used as, you know, a pejorative. And also like, it's very reminiscent of blackface. That cannot be the cover. And they were like, you know, we didn't know. I was like, please redo it. And then they made me pink. So anyway, so now I know. I mean, I was just so excited. I was just so excited to have a book. Okay. You know? And so, and I didn't want to mess anything up and be like, now I have a little bit more cachet, and I can be like, no.
Well,
So,
definitely use your power, because I know Natasha is working on a book of her own. So please make sure that you retain as much of your creative control as you possibly can. Oh, there she is. Barbara, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, about the Catskills.
There she is.
Yeah, hi, how are you? This has been so wonderful. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I am wonderful. Just hearing you and your excitement and enthusiasm, and I mean, you know, and James brings that as well. So I'm loving this, how you guys play off each other. I was wondering about your parents, because I went to Girl Scout camp. I'm 70 right now, and I'm thinking from your mother, some of the things you talked about, the food, the Head Start. I mean, it was so reminiscent of me growing up. And so what was that about with your mother? I'm trying to think of how they were, you know, that they would just kind of say, go to the Catskills and I'm going to trust that you will be okay.
That's a great question. Well, I've always been an explorer. So like anytime we had school trips, I want to go. And so they were very supportive. My mother and stepfather, very supportive of whatever it is that my school offered. They saved up money and made it happen. Right. And because you know, I was the gifted and talented, you know, and they wanted to make sure that I was doing everything that everybody else was doing, you know, just to feed my curiosity and my brain. And so, you know, they didn't go with me or anything. They didn't come and visit because they couldn't. And that, you know, that was the start of like, oh, Myrna's going away again. I'm going to let her do what she does because it makes her happy. But you know, even nowadays, like my mom's like, well, I'm going to go. Now she wants to start skiing. She's like, well, I've seen you skiing. I've never ever wanted to ski ever in my life. It never entered my brain, but now I want to take a lesson. I'm taking my family to the Catskills to have a family ski lesson.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Great, Barbara. Thank you so much for your question. It is at the top of the hour, and just in the interest of everyone's time and out of respect for our guest, I want to say thank you, Myrna, so much for being with us this evening. I also want to take a moment to thank the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and for the financial support of Ceres Innovations and Outdoor Research. We look forward to our next discussion, which will be on February 24th, where our guest will be J.R. Harris, the author of Way Out There, Adventures of a Wilderness Trekker. We'll stay on the line for just a couple of minutes while we're tuning out, but we'll go ahead and stop the recording and say thank you so much. Go out there, be joyful, and for God's sake, keep reading. Hope to see you again next month, and have a great rest of January. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.